When does someone become a master? Is it the amount of time spent on a craft or the success you achieved with it? In this Adorama original series, we'll travel throughout the United States and discover people who spent countless hours perfecting their craft and finding their own voice. Because being a master today means being able to recognize that voice and inspire people to find their own.
I was so happy about just the idea that I got a camera. I had like $355 in my bank and my camera cost about $350. And so I was broke, but I was so happy. My name is Temi Coker and I'm a multidisciplinary artist based in Dallas, Texas. 2010, I graduated high school and I went to college to study biomedical engineering. And I hated it. So 2011 came and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna switch my major. I switched to digital media. I picked up a camera because I wanted to eventually have pictures of my family and friends and my kids in the future because I didn't have a lot of myself growing up. And I remember my first camera was a Nikon D3100. I started shooting around campus and taking pictures of everything. I mean, I took a picture of a tractor, took a picture of the grass, the sky, birds, dirt. But I realized I was drawn to portraits because I realized if I took that picture, that moment is now like stored and saved forever. And they can look back and look at that picture 5 years later and still remember how they felt. That's kind of what got me started. So my style first started off with portraits, then I got into double exposure, which got me into Photoshop, which then allowed me to experiment with realism, trying to bring things that I've always imagined and make them reality. But then after a while, I was like, okay, well, this is not helping me learn graphic design. So I was like, okay, what is graphic design? Shapes, colors, vector things. So I started bringing those things into my portraits, and that's kind of how I started developing this love for patterns and mixing black and white, optical illusion, colors, things of that nature, brushes. And yeah, so that's how my style is developed. But now I think I'm in another phase where I'm like, okay, I want to bring 3D into the work now. I just know I love portraits. So when it comes to my stakes, I'm looking for a face. I'm looking for what they're wearing, how I can play with their outfit, how I can play with emotion, how I can play with different objects around me. It's not really a collage, but it kind of is because I cut things out and I place them together to kind of bring the beauty that's already in that image. A lot of my designs are not meant to take away from the portrait of the person, but they're meant to add to what is already there. I think the aspects that are very unique to my style are like me making my images black and white. People think there's a deeper meaning, but honestly, there's not. I just make my images black and white so I have free range on what type of colors I want to use. I think another thing that makes me different is I love patterns. I'm really big on optical illusion art. So you see a lot of black and white pattern splashes here in my work. My pre-production process is like, I have an idea, and for this project, I think the idea was like, I want to play with movement and jackets and textures and almost have this matrix type of feel sometimes to some of the work. And so I went online and I made a mood board. I used something called Save, SAVEE.IT. It's like Pinterest, but for graphic designers. Then I go on Keynote and I kind of break it down of like hairstyle, glasses, poses, poster inspiration. And that makes it a lot easier for me to kind of have a cohesive idea. Of course, during this process, I'm looking for a model. Once I find a model, I have everything set. And then I decide to go and find a studio to shoot. And a lot of times, the ideas I had when I first started change during the process. As far as gear, I love mirrorless, so I'm a Sony fan. I've been with them since the first mirrorless came out. Right now I use the Sony A1 and the Sony A7R Mark III. And I also use my MacBook M1 Max. I love it. And when it comes to computers, I just got the Apple Studio display, and now I have 2 screens. And I love this because of the specs and how vibrant and colorful it is. For sketching, sometimes I'll use an iPad, or sometimes my sketches almost look like me going in Photoshop and actually just trying things out, you know, and not really like drawing anything. Once the images are done, I put it on my Dropbox, make a new catalog on Lightroom, go through it and call some of my favorite shots, edit them as I would feel. Even if I make my images black and white, it's still gonna use the tones from the original image. So I need to make sure those colors are right. So that's why I take it into Lightroom, do the coloring a little bit. Once I like it, then I bring it into Photoshop. Then I mess around. So my process usually is I take the person out of the background. Then I start playing with making the image black and white to how I like it, and then start playing with color and figuring out places where I want to put patterns and colors and things of that nature and different objects. Once I feel like I'm getting to a point where this image is like speaking to me or it just looks strong, then I stop. But what I've realized is my post-production has actually helped when I'm shooting, because as I'm shooting, I'm thinking about what I'm gonna do later. When it comes to like my aesthetic and style, I think the parts that my culture plays are almost unconscious. Because I remember when I first started making posters, I was always using muted colors on purpose. Like I was forcing myself. And I remember I think 2017, I was like, this is terrible, I can't keep doing this. And I finally like went with color, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. You know, this feels natural and good. I think there are certain times where I do try to be very cautious of infusing my culture into a specific design, whether it's using like travel marks and things like that. But overall, I think the aspect of color and community and making everything look cohesive is definitely something that I can do with my eyes closed, you know, and I feel like that's something that I learned a lot growing up in Nigeria. I remember when I first started like designing, I was scared of just using black people a lot, because I was like, oh, I don't know if all these other companies are gonna hire me, but I was like, you know, I have a unique story to tell, so that's their loss. Now it feels good to be seen as a designer in this industry that creates work that speaks to his heritage, his culture, and you know, being asked by the Oscars to design the statuette, and I made the Oscar statuette black, and they showed that on national TV, and I wanted to make that type of work because I wanted the black people in that room at the Oscars to know that I see them, I appreciate what they're doing, to feel like they were meant to be there. I think it's important to be able to give back. I know there are a lot of African American and even African kids that look up to me and are inspired by the type of work that I do, and I want to make sure I don't let them down. My advice to anyone who wants to get better in what they're doing is to just start. I was very scared about 3D, and I just started, and I still don't know what I'm doing half the time, but the journey is the reward, not the destination. So I'm just going to enjoy learning. Yes, I get frustrated a lot, but I know that in 5 years, if I keep doing this, I'm gonna get better. Find out what those important things are to you. Like, do you care about your community? Are you trying to tell a story about your culture? And if so, figure out how to tell that through your artwork and your style. And one thing I always tell people is that your perspective matters. I know you can feel like someone else is doing the same thing you want to do, but they're not you. And so my suggestion and advice is to channel in those experiences and those cultures that you've experienced and the people that you've met and the community that you're in, and create work that comes out of that. Because if you don't remember your why, you're gonna start this career and just give up. But if you remember your why, you will always go back to it.